David, what are you wrong about?
Hi, Mr. Cuomo. First of all, I'm a registered Democrat who voted for Trump. I thought this would never happen, but some of the Democratic Party is finally walking up and saying President Trump is doing something good. They were meeting at a Senate meeting. What they're doing is great. What they started doing is to reunite themselves and reunite us. So please keep it up. Keep meeting, keep talking, keep fixing things, keep uniting us and the parties together. This will make our country stronger than ever in the world. I love it.
Good for you. Good for you. Fix. Instead of telling us why the other guy's worse, how do you make it better? Fix. You're right. I'm with you, David.
Boy. So we got to talk about a fascinating little trend here that seems to be happening among people who were once critics of Trump, right? They are now coming out and saying, you know what? I was wrong about Trump. The first 6 to 7 months into his presidency, the sky is not falling. The world is not ending, right? All of the predictions that were made by Democrats for the most part have basically been incorrect, okay? And it's time for Democrats to, again, admit that President Trump is not all bad. I mean, even Chris Cuomo had a whole show in which he had callers call in and admit that they were wrong about President Trump.
I'm not too proud to say that I am wrong about Trump. I'm a proud Democrat.
How so?
And he's done a lot of things. Immigration. I'm happy about what's happening with immigration. I thought the stock market would tank, and I'm pretty happy with my 401k. There's a few things that I just thought things would go wrong, and I'm very happy.
Well, that is big of you to say. It'll probably lose you some friends in this polarized environment that we're in right now. But there's nothing wrong with being happy with results, no matter who gives them to you, right? So I appreciate your candor. Next.
And you know what? A lot of calls saying the exact same thing. And the sad part is that she feels that she can't say it, you know?
Life can change in an instant. One moment you're fine. The next, well, everything is different. You're left with questions, with pain, with the feeling that you've been wrong. And the system, well, it feels like it is built against you. This is why you need somebody that's on your side, somebody that understands, somebody that will fight for you. At Morgan & Morgan, they're not just lawyers. They're advocates. They're here to give you a voice when yours feels lost. They've recovered billions for people just like you. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, takes on all types of injury cases from car accidents to medical malpractice. They fight for your rights and the compensation that you deserve if you become their client so that you can focus on healing. They've achieved significant verdicts over the past few months for the victims involved in life-altering car crashes, like out in Florida, a $12 million verdict, which was over 34 times the highest insurance offer. And they work on a contingency fee basis, which means that you don't pay unless you win. It's really that simple, to be honest with you. So you can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Black Conservative, which will be in the description below, right? The link will be in the description below, or you can scan the QR code on the screen with your phone's camera. And that brings me to this video right here of JPMorgan CEO Jamie Dimon, who is also a very strong Trump critic, but he is coming out and also basically saying that he was wrong about Trump, right? He's eating some crow here on CNBC, and I want to talk about it because this reporter is going to try very hard to get this guy to say negative things about Trump, but he's not going for it because, again, he's basically admitting that a lot of his concerns about Trump were not correct. So without further ado, let's get into it.
As Fed Chair Powell mentioned yesterday, that the lagging effects of tariffs have yet to really fully play out, that we could still see an inflation spike from here?
You know, I think when you look at it, first of all, there are a lot of forces at work in the economy, and tariffs are one of them. The remilitarization of the world, the fiscal deficits, the demographics, all those things are going to drive various things, and yeah, they may drive slightly higher inflation. What you really want is more growth. That is far more important than whether inflation ticks up or down a little bit. So, and then tariffs themselves, they've been greatly moderated. People can, I think, kind of deal with the 15% kind of number. In a lot of cases, these are agreements in principle. The 15% relates to half of the imports, not 100%. And I think our imports around $4 trillion, goods imports. So if it's on average 7 or 8%, you're talking $300 billion a year, on a $30 trillion economy. So that might have some effect. And it's also quite clear some is being passed on and some is not. And we just don't know yet. And you may see more effect down the road. We'll have to wait and see.
So it sounds
so Jamie Dimon is actually making a point that the mainstream liberal media refuses to acknowledge, which is why they're so shocked that we're not seeing hyperinflation as a result of the tariffs, okay? Even though we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in inflation, but that is not being driven by the tariffs. That's being driven by the normal factors that go into inflation, which, is government spending, money printing, right? Those are the normal factors, right? And all those other factors that Jamie Dimon outlined as well, too. But in a video I made yesterday, the Fed studied the price effect of President Trump's tariffs, and they found that for core CPE inflation, tariffs only added 0.08 percentage points. So out of total inflation, tariffs only account for about 3 to 4% of total inflation. It's a rounding error, which totally makes sense when you consider the fact that about a third of all U.S. good imports are not affected by the tariffs. Okay, so not all the goods that are coming in are affected by tariffs. Also, on top of that, good imports account for approximately 12 to 13% of U.S. GDP, which means that with tariffs hitting 71% of the goods coming in, but only accounting for 12 to 13% of U.S. GDP, that means that roughly 8 to 9% of our GDP is directly exposed to tariffs. So when you're talking about 8 to 9% of GDP being affected by 10 to 15% tariffs, that's not a lot, right? That's not a lot at all. Okay, that's not a very big portion of the economy. In fact, that's a very small portion of the economy, not insignificant, but so small that this is why you only have a very modest effect on prices from these tariffs, because our economy is just not that dependent on imported goods. It's just not. But my whole point is that the Fed and the liberal media focusing on the price increases or the effect on prices as a result of tariffs is really missing the mark, right? That's not actually what they should be focused on as much as they should be focused on the possible slowdown in economic growth due to the uncertainty around tariffs, which I think is the real criticism of the tariff policies at this point, not necessarily the effect that tariffs have on prices. And I think that's what a lot of these people are getting wrong.
Sounds like you're a little less concerned than maybe you were in your annual letter, where you said that, tariffs can be inflationary just based on the deals that you've seen so far.
Yeah, but yes, because these wars are still not getting worse. I think that's important. I think we have a tax bill that created a very stable tax environment, which is internationally competitive. So I think it's really important that people should understand, if the United States has a non-internationally competitive tax system, it will be bad for the people of the United States, and believe it or not, particularly lower income people. And that's where people completely miss sometimes. And so, and then we started tariffs. We didn't know what they're going to be, and now we kind of know, and they're more moderate and thoughtful, and more carefully done. And hopefully they'll help some companies export. Maybe some people move manufacturing back here. So so far so good.
Speaking of the tax and spending plan that was just passed, were you surprised that the bond vigilantes didn't react so much to the prospect of a widening deficit? Do you think that's something that we could see still at risk down the road?
No, because there's two different things here. Our deficit is $2 trillion. And you guys focused on the fact that this is going to add $2.5 to $3 trillion, and obviously there'll be some offset for tariffs. It's going to go from $30 trillion of debt to $50 trillion in 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's not the $3 trillion that matters. It's the extraordinary additions being added each year. And so I'm happy we have the tax bill in place. The tax side, what your R&D expensing is, your physical equipment expensing and stuff like that. But now we got to attack that deficit. We can't have 6.5% or 7% deficits forever. We may have time. I am quite clear. We don't know this is not, I'm talking about next year, but there will be effects, and we should attack it. We can be far more efficient. There are far too many tax breaks that should be gotten rid of. We can do multi-year budgeting. We can probably collect more taxes. I think we can fix it, but it's going to take a lot of hard work, and particularly in the part of Congress, like to roll up their sleeves and do the things they really need to do to make sure we have responsible fiscal policy.
Line by line budgeting.
Line by line.
Like what you all do.
Yeah, so hard for me to disagree with Jamie Dimon there, right? Yes, the deficit is a problem. The debt is a problem, and Republicans need to address that next, okay? We have the big, beautiful bill. Great. We have all these tax cuts that hopefully will provide some certainty, okay, that the business community is looking for, okay, because with tariffs, there are a lot of uncertainties, and I think those uncertainties probably are playing a role in the fact that our economic growth is not as strong as it should be, because the key to success for the Trump administration is going to be economic growth, which we're going to get, okay, from this big, beautiful bill. But at the same time, we may or may not be seeing some issues in the labor market. And I want to talk about it because I think that the mainstream liberal media is going to miss the biggest point that should be made about the job numbers that we're getting, which are not good on the surface.
83,000 private sector. Yeah. I want to push back on that. I think this is more about the Federal Reserve. Again, we've got a bifurcated economy. The Fed they have a regressive approach here, right? They're trying to still clamp down on this economy, but it's not working. It's hurting 70% of the folks out there. Look at delinquencies. Look at all of the things that are hurting the average household, I think, and also small businesses. Coming into this year, the biggest question was, how would they even refinance? We're talking about financing government debt. How do we help the small businesses out there? There are two economies. The Fed's looking at the wealthiest folks out there and thinking it means everyone, and I think that's hurting the jobs market more than anything else.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I agree that this report is so critical for the Federal Reserve's next move. Stephanie, how do you read things?
Well, I'm just stunned at another number in this report, and that is the downward revision to the June figure from 147,000 to just 14,000. So looking over the last 3 months, we've got 73,000 in July, 14,000 in June, and 19,000 in May. Those are incredibly weak headline numbers, and that's the total, not just private jobs. So this is a very soft report. And I guess what I'm really blown away by is that July generally is a report where the seasonals are such that you can surprise on the upside very easily, because 1 million people roughly drop out of the labor force with the school year, the school vacation. So that sets a very low seasonal bar for the data to clear, and clearly we tripped over the bar. So this is a very weak report. And sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I guess, it certainly strengthens the argument materially for the Fed to cut rates. It's interesting because one presumes they had at least some of the preliminary components of this report when they were in their meeting on Wednesday and made the decision. They probably had an early look at this. So that probably is one of the reasons why you had the two dissents, but amazing that Powell stood firm despite that in the face of this data.
Well, it's a great point.
Yeah, so you see, now you heard that. Now, this jobs report has a little bit of everything for everybody, right? In the sense that the mainstream liberal media, they will look at this jobs report and then they'll say, look, see, this is Trump's tariffs. They're destroying the economy. We told you, right? Because, revisions in June and May are down about 200,000 plus jobs, right? About 250,000 plus jobs now apparently were not created in June and May, according to this report. And then in July, it was weaker than expected. So this is a big deal because it signals weakness in the economy, which for President Trump is kind of a good thing because that would justify interest rate cuts, which is what President Trump really, really, really wants. And the reason why he really wants it is because he knows that interest rate cuts paired with the big, beautiful bill is going to drive a lot of growth. Okay, when you talk about productivity, when you talk about hiring, and the benefits of the big, beautiful bill have not even come into effect yet because there hasn't been enough time, right? But if he can get those interest rates going lower, then that can be good in the long term for what he really wants. However, in the short term, again, doesn't look good because of the fact that it appears that the economy is slowing down significantly due to the uncertainty from the tariffs. However, if you look a little bit deeper into the numbers, okay, surrounding who's actually gaining jobs and who's losing jobs, tells a little bit of a different story, because apparently over the last few months since February, we've had native-born workers are up 1.8 million total jobs for native-born workers. However, for foreign-born workers, it's down 1.5 million, right? So a vast majority of the job losses are for foreign-born workers, right? They're not for native-born workers. If you are a native-born worker, you've been doing pretty well, okay? But if you're foreign-born, then you've been losing your job, which could suggest that a lot of what we're seeing in this jobs report is not necessarily just, from the tariffs, right? But also from immigration policy, the mass deportations.
You're seeing downward revisions of 258,000 over the last couple of months. Only 73,000 jobs added. And it looks like, not just to me, but to participants in this market, that today's weak payroll numbers are a direct result of the conscious policy to limit immigration. And I'm just wondering if that trade-off is delivering the kind of benefits you want to see to U.S.-born workers.
Well, I can tell you this. I've been a business owner for 20 years. When we make decisions, we look at all aspects, and there's certainly snapshots. But what has happened on the ground? The One Big Beautiful Bill by Congress, the president leaning in and keeping the promises made by negotiating fair trade deals for the American workforce. And now what we need is the Federal Reserve to jump in and lower those interest rates. I talked to businesses just yesterday who said, we've invested in our American workers. We're paying attention to our facilities. We're wanting to invest and borrow more money, but they're concerned with borrowing that more money. So that's another leg of the stool that can be done. We should all be rowing in the same direction.
But is it the only leg of the stool that matters, Madam Secretary? Because we had a 3-month run rate adding 150,000 jobs. And now that those policies that this administration has put into effect are active, we're looking at a 3-month run rate of 37,000. So it's drastically fallen. And what it looks like is the policies that you're putting into place are reducing job growth.
Strong job growth has happened, 3.9% over the last year. Consumer confidence is up. Unemployment is holding steady. Again, almost 500,000 new jobs have been added since President Trump has leaned in. I can tell you this, it's not the only leg of the stool for interest rates, but it's one of the important legs right now, because as businesses now know that the table is set.
Yeah, so again, this is a fascinating situation, right? Because on the surface, this jobs report can justify rate cuts, which is what the president wants. However, the headlines will be the mainstream media saying that, see, the Trump economy is weak. But again, if you look at who's actually losing their job, then you can see that, well, it's mainly government workers, okay, because there are government layoffs happening. And also on top of that, foreign-born workers, right? So people who are not native-born Americans are losing their jobs, right? Which, could be a result of Trump's mass deportation policy, okay, which is what the American people voted for. So that kind of puts this jobs report in a different light when you realize that foreigners are the ones that are losing their jobs the most, okay, and native-born Americans actually gaining, okay, when it comes to the labor market. But again, the media is not going to tell that story because that may help Trump, right? So with that being said, the downward revisions for the jobs report is still very concerning. And because of that, President Trump has announced that he's fired the Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner, who apparently was a Biden appointee, over this mistake, right? He's basically saying it is important to have accurate job numbers, which I agree with. It is important, right? We definitely want accurate numbers. So he is going to replace her, right? And he also called for Jerome Powell to be fired as well, too, because of the fact that he is still playing games with interest rates. So, I mean, again, my point is that the good thing is that if those native versus foreign-born worker statistics are accurate, then that means that the job losses that are happening are mainly, again, a result of the mass deportation policies, right? But also at the same time, the top line numbers for the jobs report could justify rate cuts, which is ultimately what the president wants. So all in all, right, not as bad as it seems, okay? But we're going to see what happens. I think moving forward, the next few months, the numbers are going to be super, super, super important because now with these numbers, the Fed, they're going to be under a lot more pressure to go ahead and lower rates. But we're going to see. I think they're paying attention to the wrong metrics, right? I think they're paying attention to inflation when I think they actually should be paying attention to other statistics, to be honest with you, because the economy is probably not as strong as it should be, okay? And for those reasons, I think rate cuts probably can be justified. But again, we're going to see what happens. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.